We're all sorts of people here. This is a selfie. This is a selfie. This is a selfie. Okay, let's start with this. A quick, shortish list of objects or things that some people believe are real, some people believe they exist, but that you don't believe they exist because you know better. So, like, I need some examples.
Leprechaun.
Leprechauns are spelled like that. Leprechauns. Okay, great. Something else. Unicorns. Great. Shout out like two more. Bigfoot, I heard. And mermaids, good. Numbers? Oh, no. Gotta leave that off. That'll ruin the whole talk. We can tentatively also, much more controversially, put God on there for the moment. We'll come back to God. Okay. So here's the thing. It would be nice if we had some sort of principle that you are following that explains why you don't believe in these things, but you do believe in the things that you do believe in, like, mountains, and fried rice, and all the other stuff that really exists. So, well, here's a first go at a principle like that. The first thing you might notice is, looking at this list, is that the stuff over here that you rationally don't believe in, you've never experienced that stuff. You've never sensed it with any of your senses. So the principle that we might start working with, the one that's operating in your mind, a good one, might be something like, you should only believe in things that you experience. Okay, that's a first go at a sort of a principle that's going to separate these from these. But I don't think that's going to work because it's probably too restrictive. That is, it's going to get the result that you shouldn't believe in all sorts of things. It's going to rule out a whole bunch of stuff because you haven't experienced that stuff that you really should believe in, that it is rational to believe in. So presumably we could think of some examples of things that you personally have not experienced but that you should believe are real.
Like Saturn.
What's that? Saturn. Well, no, I don't know about you, but I took a college course in astronomy, and I've not only seen photographs of Saturn, I looked through a telescope and saw Saturn personally. So maybe you didn't. So we'll go with you. Yeah, good. Because if you look through the telescope, of course, the actual light from Saturn that's reflected from the sun, it goes from the sun, it hits Saturn, and then it goes, the very light then goes into the telescope and then goes literally into your eyeball. That's the very light that traveled all the way through space. So I've totally experienced Saturn. Well, some of you may get there. Anyway, but good. If you haven't experienced it yourself, then you might just trust me. There might be enough trustworthy folks, right? So maybe we quickly revise the principle to a second go, something like, you should only believe in things that you or someone trustworthy, right, experiences. All right. What do we think about that? Still too restrictive? Michael? Oh, a good question that we will not answer or discuss any further. Excellent. Ken?
Blind people.
Well, no, blind people have senses. They experience things. They just experience things with their... Blind people experience mountains. They can hike. They can hike. They can feel the mountain with their hands. They can smell the mountain air. They can hear the mountain breeze.
Clouds. I can't experience clouds.
No, guys, you can experience all these things. You can see anything you can see, you can experience. Anything you can smell, you can experience. You can smell all sorts of stuff. But it seems to me like there's things... Well, let me just push this a little bit farther forward. It seems to me that there are things that no one has experienced, or at least for a certain amount of time no one had yet experienced, but that we still were rational even at that time, in believing in the existence of those things. Ryan?
Something like an electron constitute.
Yeah, something like an electron. Yeah, right? Like this rules out electrons because like at least for a while no one experienced electrons, and now we have electron microscopes, and like do we experience them now? Not clear. Too many hands. Let's just stick with electrons. I mean, there's going to be other things like that, like Pluto. Before we saw Pluto, right? There was something about the orbits of other planets, and we knew Pluto had to be there. Anyway, so we've got electrons, and we've got Saturn. So we're going to have to revise this principle again, and a quick revision of it might be, you should only believe in things that you or someone trustworthy experiences, or that must exist to explain what we do experience. Right? Like, that's the deal with electrons, I take it, is that we did experience all sorts of stuff, like, I don't know, electric shocks and light bulbs and things like that, and it turns out that electrons needed to be there, even though we couldn't yet experience them, or maybe we still haven't experienced them. They need to be there in order to explain the stuff that we do experience. So this revised version of the principle, I think this is the one we'll stick with. It seems to get it just right. Or at least a lot of people think that something like this gets it right. Right? It gets rid of, oh wait, these should have been over here. No one was going to correct me? That those should have gone, okay. Everybody understands. Yeah, because like electrons and Saturn are real. Anyway, it seems to be the right principle for what sorts of stuff you should believe in. There are different names that we could give a principle like this. Empiricism is a name you might have for it. It's a certain application maybe of Occam's razor, whatever. That's another fancy kind of name. You might think that broadly speaking, this kind of principle, if you're operating with it, could be called something like the scientific worldview, maybe, or a certain version of it. Whatever we call it, it seems like a good one. Like it seems like the right principle to operate with. And, well, we're not the first people to come up with it. This principle, or something like this, was very attractive to many philosophers, including the greatest philosopher of the Scottish Enlightenment, David Hume. And here he is. Hold on a sec. He looks like this. Okay, so here's what Hume does. This was a good idea, it turned out. At least a good idea if you wanted other people to read the stuff that you wrote for like several hundred years. His idea was take that principle, empiricism or whatever, and apply it to moral reality, moral truths or moral laws. So like, real quick, here's what he says. Take any action allowed to be vicious, willful murder, for instance. That is, pick some form of behavior that you think is evil. Vicious means exhibiting a vice. So evil. Take any action that you think is evil, examine it in all lights, and see if you can find the matter of fact or real existence which you call vice. That is, take this thing. So like, take a willful murder. So like, someone murders someone else intentionally. Willfully means intentionally, right? Someone murders someone else intentionally with no justification. It's not in self-defense or anything like that. Think about the example. Look at the event. Look at the action in front of you. And see if you can find the wrongness. He says, in whichever way you take it, you find only certain passions, motives, volitions, and thoughts. That is, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff. He doesn't mention these, but one thing you're going to experience is you're going to experience like blood. There's going to be blood, and there's going to be the smell. There's going to be the arms moving, right? And then you're going to also have, well, good enough evidence for believing in passions, motives, volitions, and thoughts. That is, the murderer is going to have some feelings in them, right? And you're going to have good reason for believing that those feelings exist, because they, you might think, are needed to explain the actions that you observe, right? So you're following this empiricist principle. What do you find? What do you see? And what do you have evidence for? Well, you've got the blood, and you've got the hands and the legs, and you've got the anger, and you've got the fear. Those things are all real. You see them when you look at... don't do it. Don't do that to me, screen. Check the input. Yeah, nice. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Right. So you've got reason on this principle to believe in all those things. But then he says, there is no other matter of fact in the case. There's nothing else there, right? There's nothing else other than the arms and the legs and the blood and the anger and the fear. That's all there is for you to believe in when you look at a case of something that's supposedly evil. The vice entirely escapes you as long as you consider the object, that is the evilness, the wrongness, the moral quality. You can't find it. It escapes you. As long as the only thing you're looking at is the murder itself, the action, right? That's the object. The object is the murder, the thing you're looking at. You can never find it till you never find what? You can never find the wrongness, the evil, the badness. You can never find it till you turn your reflection into your own breast and find a sentiment of disapprobation which arises in you towards this action. Here is a matter of fact, but 'tis the object of feeling. It lies in yourself, not in the object. That is, there's something like wrongness, sure, but the only wrongness that you find is not some objective wrongness that exists in the action of murder. It's just a feeling inside of you that you dislike this action. That's all that this empiricist principle that we produced is going to let you believe is real. If you really follow the principle, then all you can believe in is, well, blood, and feet, and arms, and anger, and fear, and then another feeling, which is your feeling of disapproval. So that when you pronounce any action or character to be vicious, to be evil, so when you call something wrong, whenever you condemn something as wrong or unjust, you mean nothing but that from the constitution of your nature you have a feeling or sentiment of blame from the contemplation of it. That is, look, all there is to rightness and wrongness is feelings that people get. There's no objective rightness or wrongness in the objects. It's not objective. It's not in the objects. It's not really out there in the murder. There's nothing really wrong with murder. It's just all there is some feelings that people get about it. That's what happens if you apply this principle to moral facts or moral reality. Okay, here's the thing. This principle is even stronger, I think, than Hume realized, right? If you just run this same argument that Hume ran, you can run it on even more stuff than just morality. So, but if we're going to understand that, we need two distinctions, or one distinction and then one division between three things, like a tristinction. I don't really know what the word for that is. Anyway, so stick with me for a few seconds here. Okay. We need the idea of a descriptive law and a normative law, right? So a descriptive law is like a generalization about the universe. It's just a pattern, sort of, that we observe in the universe. Like, Ohm's law. Anybody know what Ohm's law is? It's like a thing in science. Yeah.
In physical science, Ohm's law relates to electricity.
Uh-huh.
It's basically resistance.
Yeah, it's like resistance in like a thing. It's like the current is like I is like the voltage over the other thing. Resistance. Is that Ohm's law? Derek has a PhD in science, but not in biology. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, anyway, there are rules like this. Or like Newton's law of let's just pretend we know what Ohm's law is. And then Newton had a law of universal gravitation, right? And the idea was all the particles in the universe are attracted to one another at a proportional to their mass, proportional to the product of their masses. You multiply their masses. Proportional to the product of their masses divided, or inversely proportional to their distance.
Square root of distance.
Square root of distance. All right, guys. All right. Give the students a chance. Okay. Right. So descriptive laws are just like descriptions. They're just ways things are. Like that's just the way things are in our universe. Is that all particles are attracted to each other at blah 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 blah. That's just the way things are. Then there are laws, or facts if you like, about how things ought to be. Right? So murder is wrong. That's not how things are. It's not that's not saying murders don't happen. That's saying they ought not happen. Right? Or you ought not murder. You shouldn't. these say how things are, and these say how things should be. But notice, there's more than one type of this. Right? There's the moral ones, like murder is wrong, and then there's the we call them prudential ones, like diversify investments. And then there's ones about how to be rational, like believe, the earth is round. This is the point. So the point is, we've got a difference between descriptive and normative stuff. Don't worry, we're going to come back to this, and we're going to use Hume's test again, right? We've got the descriptive stuff is how things are, and then we've got the normative stuff, that's how things should be. But there's different varieties of this one. Here's what I mean. So maybe we're very comfortable on the surface with moral normativity. Right? That's stuff that's wrong that you shouldn't do. Maybe it's facts that you owe to other people. You shouldn't murder them, for instance. Right? The prudential stuff, here's how you understand the prudential stuff. Okay. Some of you are no doubt ignorant of things that happened in the 90s. Here's an example. Beyonce was in a group. Okay? She was in a group before she was a solo artist. The group was called Destiny's Child. There were 3 of them. Okay? Kelly, Roland, and Michelle. I don't remember Michelle's last name with an H. Anyway, she was in a group, right? And they were very successful. You think Beyonce's big. Destiny's Child was big-ish, right? The group was big. And then there was a point when she had to make a decision about whether she was going to stay with the group or become a solo artist, release a solo album. Now, I don't know what the inner workings of the group or whatever, but you can imagine that the following happened. You can imagine that there was a deal that the singers in the group made that was look, we're going to stick together for 4 albums. And they make a promise. And they shake hands or something. Right? Or whatever. So she's made a promise, let's say, to stick with the group. But you guys know how show business is. You got a moment when you've got to take your chance. This is your only chance to make it as a solo artist. You're in the news, and you're not going to be in the news in a few years from now, and this is the time to release a solo album and become Beyonce. Right? Because right now you're kind of Beyonce, but you're in a group, On the one hand, she's got a moral obligation. Or there's a moral rule. Maybe the rule is something like, keep your promises. Keep your promises. Right? So in one sense, that's the moral sense, she should stay in the group. She made a promise. Right? But there's another sense in which this is her chance, folks. This is her chance to make it as a solo artist. So if she was only interested in what she should do for herself, then she should look, if she breaks this promise to the other members of Destiny's Child, she'll be fine. She's going to have enough money to get other friends, The difference here is the difference between what you ought to do, maybe what you owe to others, and maybe what you owe to yourself. Right? What you ought to do, what's in your own best interest. Now, you may think that one of these is more important than the other. But all I want you to see now is that they're both non-descriptive. They both seem to be facts about what someone ought to do, not what they do. Right? This says what you ought to do morally, whatever that means. This says what you ought to do for yourself, whatever that means, but it's still something that you ought to do. There's a third type, right? These are all varieties of normativity. The third type is epistemic. It doesn't work with the Beyonce example as well, because epistemic norms, episteme is the Greek word for knowledge. So epistemic norms are facts about what you ought to believe, not how you ought to act. So given the evidence presently available, you ought to believe that the earth is round. You just really should. If you don't, if you think it's flat, given the evidence available, then you've made a mistake. You haven't done what you ought. In the epistemic sense. Epistemic just means rationally, what you ought to believe, rationally speaking. Okay, so we've got the descriptive and the normative, and then we've got different varieties of normativity. Run Hume's test. The same thing, where you just look at something and see if you can experience the morality, the moralness, and you can't, and so therefore you shouldn't believe in it. Right? Run that test against all types of normativity, and you'll get the same result. Right? We all know what Beyonce did. She released a solo album. Worked great, right? Screw Kelly and Michelle, right? I don't know if she broke a promise. I don't know. I don't want her coming after me. The point is, she's thinking to herself, look, at least prudentially speaking, I ought to release a solo album. This is my time, folks. Well, that fact, there she is, she's deliberating, and then she's writing the album. Does she write them? I really don't know. And then she's writing the album, and then she's releasing it. Look at the action. Look at the object. Is there any sense in which she ought to do it? Where's the ought? Where's the should of prudence? You can't find it. All you see is Beyonce and like records on tables and stuff like that, and her thoughts, right? She might have thoughts about what she ought to do. You might have to believe in those because those are needed to explain what you do experience, right? But you don't need to appeal to actual objective facts about what people ought to do, even for themselves, in order to explain the things you do experience. So on this principle, according to this empiricist principle, you shouldn't believe that these laws, these norms are real, these facts, if you like. And the same goes for epistemic facts, facts about what is really rational to believe. Those have to go as well. Okay, so that's the argument against the existence of objective morality. And it's an argument, well, against more than that, against any kind of normative stuff at all. Any kinds of facts about what's right or what's wrong, even not just morally, but for yourself or rationally, right? Okay, that's the argument, is that you shouldn't believe in those things for the same reason that you shouldn't believe in leprechauns. There's, I think, now Hume, I don't think realized this, although I haven't read every word that Hume ever wrote. There's a big problem with this argument, it seems to me. I'm sure other people have noticed this also, but I haven't read them saying it, right? But there's a big problem with this argument. It looks really good, because the principle is great, or at least looks great, right? And it looks like it does apply in these ways to moral reality, prudential reality, epistemic reality. But there's a problem. I'll just say what the problem is unless someone interrupts me. The problem is that it's self-defeating. What the hell is this? This, with one of these in it. Here's the thing. I called it a principle a bunch of times, like it's an empiricist principle. But, well, it seems like we could have also called it an epistemic law, right? It says what you ought to do. Specifically, it says what you ought to believe. Should you believe that leprechauns exist? It says no. Should you believe that morality exists? It says no. Should you believe that unicorns exist? It says no, right? Okay, should you believe that the epistemic fact that you should believe in things that you experience, or things that have been experienced by trustworthy people, or things that must exist in order for you to have those experiences? Like, should you believe in that fact, that normative fact? It says no. So if this principle is right, if you should adopt it, then it gets the result that you shouldn't believe that there's any normative law, objective normative law like this. If you adopt this principle, then it says that you should reject this principle. That's a problem, folks. That's enough, it seems to me, to save from this one particular attack, like objective moral facts. We haven't, of course, by that move, right, shown that objective moral facts do exist. But it seems to me like that's enough, or close to enough, to save objective moral facts from what is a very famous and seemingly very powerful argument against them. Let me say one more thing, and then I'm out of stuff, so then it'll be what everybody else wants to say. Should we just trash the principle then? Right? If something is self-defeating, you usually just toss it in the garbage. Because if something defeats itself, then it's been defeated. And once it's defeated, there it goes. Right? It seems to me like, no. It seems it's too good. it's too good to let go. The right move, I think, is to just say it only applies to descriptive entities. Right? So like, this is a principle. We could just revise the principle, right? We just build that into the principle. It says you should only believe in descriptive things. You should only believe in descriptive things that you or someone trustworthy experiences, or that must exist to explain what we or you experience. Then, well, if we revise the principle like that, then it'll still get rid of unicorns. It'll still get rid of leprechauns. It'll keep electrons. It'll keep mountains. And it'll keep fried rice. Anyway, that's it. That's all I've got. This talk is done. Now we'll just take questions and talk philosophy for until they kick us out of the room. Frank?
Yes.
Yes, Frank.
I was paying attention to I don't remember what you said about why that is a self-repeating.
Yeah, let's just say it again. Good. That's always the best. I agree. Okay, here's the thing. The principle says you should only believe in the existence of things that either you experience or that someone trustworthy experienced or experiences, or that must exist in order to explain the things that either you or someone trustworthy experiences. Right? But if this is a good principle, it's because there's some objective, normative fact out there in the world, a normative law, if you like it. There's some law out there, some normative law about what you ought to believe, right? And this is the sentence that writes down that law, right? That expresses what that law is. So a law's an entity, why not, right? If you follow this principle without the little word descriptive up there, right, then you get the result that you shouldn't believe in normative laws. But it is itself a normative law, right? Because you don't experience normative laws, no one trustworthy experiences normative laws, and you do not need to posit their existence in order to explain the things that you or others do experience. So, according to this principle, there is no objective normative law that says that. So therefore, if there's no objective law that says that, then you don't need to adopt this principle. So if you adopt this principle, you don't need to adopt this principle. That's how it defeats itself. It categorizes itself along with unicorns and leprechauns and Bigfoot. Ryan.
Good memory, yes. First, great talk. It's really refreshing to hear someone on campus actually affirm objective morality.
Oh, you think they hate it? Okay, I don't know. Maybe.
It seems that this proposition, I don't know, what do you call it?
Principle. Empiricist principle.
Sufficient, at least not the way it's written. For example, I feel like I'm rationally justified in believing that tomorrow will come about.
Yep.
Clearly, no one has experienced tomorrow, nor is it necessary.
Good.
Or maybe it is necessary.
Good.
Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, is it necessary? Well, I don't think tomorrow. Well, here's the thing. Here's how I'm gonna respond. I'm gonna lean heavily on the word exists, right? So here's the thing. Should you believe that tomorrow exists? Well, actually, I think no, it doesn't. First of all, I don't know if times exist at all. That's weird. But maybe if times exist, I mean, you'd have to ask the metaphysician. But maybe if times exist, only one of them exists, and that's the present, right now.
Okay,
so
right now, hold on.
Yeah.
You're talking about something that's not written on the board. I think you might want to append, believe in the existence or descriptive things on existing things. You don't have existence up there.
I don't have the You're right. I didn't even put. Yeah. Well, believe in. Yeah. Good. Good. But you can always. There's more carrots. You just stick a little one of these in there, and you just go with. You should only believe in the existence of. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I had in mind the whole time, actually. So actually, everybody go back and just stick in the existence of the whole time. Right. Yeah. So you only believe. Yeah. Good. I didn't even have the word existence up there. Fine. You should only believe in the existence of things that you or someone trustworthy experiences, or that must exist in order to explain what you do experience. And then maybe this principle says tomorrow doesn't exist, but it doesn't. It will.
I agree. If that's in the yes, you're right. The objection fails.
Yeah. That's the best I got. I don't know your name. Grace.
Can you make a case for objective morality? This was like defending
Yeah, good.
against it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. It's one thing. It's one thing to defend a claim from an attack. It's another thing to demonstrate that claim is actually true. Because of course you could defend something from some attacks, but some other attack might kill it, right? Here's the best I got. This is good. This is written on my notes as like bonus if I need to kill time. Give this positive argument. This isn't really so much a positive argument for the existence of objective morality, but it's something. We already believe. So we believe in certain things, certain mundane things like mountains and molecules and milkshakes or whatever. And then I want to say we already believe in some normative entities. Like if we look at this list of normative stuff, we definitely believe there are real objective ones of these. Epistemic laws? Oh goodness, we believe in these. All of you, right? Pick your favorite flat earther in your family who comes to Thanksgiving and gives their flat Earth speech, right? It's really flat and the photos are faked, and etc. So on and so forth, right? Are they doing something? Is it really true that they're breaking some law, some real law that says, look, given this evidence, you should believe that the Earth is round? My suggestion is yes. They really and truly, objectively speaking, are being irrational, at least as regards that thing. So you already believe in these, I want to say. This is a part of reality for you, right? Yep. Oh, good. A power off, are you sure? Yes. Yes. Okay. You already believe in these. These are already things that you think are real. And then the thought is why not just add some more? That is, you might have been worried that moral stuff, moral entities, moral objects were weird and different than other stuff that you ordinarily believe in, right? Than pretzels or whatever. But you've already got some normative stuff. And so if this is real, then this might as well be real too. That is, there's nothing additionally spooky or bizarre or weird about moral facts about what ought to be the case than there are about epistemic facts about what you ought to believe. And then once you realize that moral facts are no spookier than epistemic facts, then it just seems you kind of have a prima facie, on the face of it, inclination to think that, look, it's just wrong, like torturing kittens or willful murder or pick your favorite evil thing. You think that thing just is wrong, objectively speaking, I suggest. And if that's true, you might have to fight that inclination, but the thought is look, if you already got these, then there's no reason to fight it. You've already let the normativity into the gate or something, so some metaphor, so just let them in too. That's the best I got on the fly.
Hi, my name's Justin.
Justin.
What I was thinking about was your principle applies to things that clouds say exist, and then it goes on to say that you or someone you trust, but different cultures believe in different things.
Yeah.
So if you have a very religious culture,
Yeah.
they would believe in God.
Yeah.
God would have probably possess the objective morality.
Yeah. Or he would write it down and give it to you or something like that. Yeah.
But then in a non-religious culture, that God may not exist, so then you don't have that being to give you the objective morality.
Yeah.
The principle doesn't always apply to everyone, because not everybody believes in the same thing, so doesn't believe that the same thing exists.
Yeah, good. One way to put it, maybe this is too brief of a summary of your point, is there is just, and this is true, you're just right, there's massive disagreement, right? Globally speaking. Well, or it seems like there's massive disagreement. You might think, on closer inspection, it might be that, there's marginal disagreement, but there's more agreement than there is disagreement. But let's just assume that there is massive disagreement. I'm not so sure that shows that there's no one true objective fact of the matter, right? There's massive disagreement about a lot of stuff. And so what's something that, I mean, flat Earth is the example that sticks in my mind because it's stuck there already. So there's some significant disagreement about that. But like, we don't then think like, look, they've got their Earth shape, and we've got our Earth shape, and theirs apply to them, and ours apply to us. No, they're just wrong. Those flat Earthers. We disagree, and they're wrong. So like, if we disagree about moral facts, like maybe we're just right, or maybe we're wrong and somebody else is right. But like, here's the thought: the mere fact of disagreement. I mean, maybe if you build it up a little bit more, it might suggest that there's no objective fact behind there, making one group right and one group wrong, or one person right and one person wrong. But the mere fact of disagreement doesn't seem to show that there's no objective fact of the matter. Yeah.
So I see how, for example, we use to understand descriptive things you can physically touch and you understand whatever.
Yeah.
But how can you use it to explain actual morality, the difference between right and wrong? Like, how do we use this principle, or how
good.
use this principle of figuring out whether or not Beyonce is right or wrong?
Yeah, good. So okay. So we have technical terms for the distinction that you're making. So the technical name is the difference between a consideration of ethics and meta-ethics. You don't have to remember that because there's no quiz, because this isn't part of a class or anything. Right, so like an ethical question, a straightforward ethical question is like, what should Beyonce do? Right? This won't get us an answer to a question like that. Because this is about a sort of like bigger, broader question, not actually a more important question, right? But a bigger, broader question about, are there even moral facts at all? Right? So like the whole talk actually has been about this broader, we'd say meta-ethical issue about whether moral or ethical facts, I've just switched to ethical from moral. I use them synonymously. Some people distinguish them, sorry. It's been about this bigger, broader issue of like whether there's any morality at all. But then you're right. It doesn't give us any answers to the question of, well, what are the moral truths? What are they specifically? I want a list. I want to know what they are. For that, you need, so we have Philosophy 119. That's Introduction to Ethics. That'll deal with first order ethical questions. 121. That's Contemporary Moral Problems. That'll deal with first order ethical questions. There's a class in meta-ethics. There are all sorts of other, there's how many are there? Hundreds of philosophers who focus on those issues? Thousands? Yeah, of course there's thousands. Sorry. Michael. Oh, I already got Michael. Michael already said something. Pause, Michael. Was there anyone else who had their hand raised? I know that you did, but now you're not raising it again, which is perfectly fine. Unless it's in this. Okay. Heather had something.
I wanted to note that it says not just listen to somebody who we trust, but that they experience.
Oh, yeah. Well, good. Good. Right. So we shouldn't, I hope that I phrased it right. You should only believe in the existence of descriptive things that you or someone trustworthy experiences.
Right. So some of those stuff that we disagree about is stuff that we depend on our religious authorities for, but they didn't actually
experience.
See, hear, smell, touch.
Yeah, that's right. Right. So you have some trustworthy folks, right? Like your aunt or someone, right? And I'm just going to grant that your aunt is trustworthy, right? But that doesn't mean you believe everything your aunt says. You should only believe that things that your aunt says about things that your aunt experienced, right? You shouldn't believe everything that your aunt says. And then, if your aunt says that she experienced some things that plausibly she didn't experience, and there's other reasons to think she's not trustworthy, then you shouldn't even believe her about things she claims to have experienced. But yes, it's only things that they have experienced that these trustworthy people should be believed about.
Do the trustworthy people have to still be alive?
I don't see why. No.
They don't have to be.
No, they don't have to be alive.
So they could be like
they could be
described in the Bible or something.
Yeah, I mean anyone. Yeah.
People who talk to God.
You might think, well, good. It could be people. It could be people.
Israelites
good.
Got to see
They were there.
God came down in a cloud in front of Mount Sinai.
Right. Yeah, good. I mean, there's
the original tribe people.
Right. Well, and then there's other prophets who got to see things or got to smell or hear things. Right? They got to experience things like that. I should have added, I think I forgot to add this. When you add this last clause at the end, that you can believe in things that must exist in order to explain what you or others experience, like that clause will almost certainly get you Pluto and electrons, but it will maybe also get you God. Like there are arguments for the existence of God. You'll have to take philosophy of religion for these, right? There are arguments for the existence of God that go by way of, look, here's some stuff that you've experienced. The only way to explain this stuff, or the best way, is by believing that some God exists. Okay, anyway, but that's not directly in response to Gary's point. The point is just, well, anyway, okay, there's here. Well, so then I need to say nothing.
Heather also mentioned the example of numbers earlier on.
Oh, yeah, what about numbers?
Yeah, well, will that fall under the second must exist to explain? It might.
Controversially, that's right.
To explain
this will get you.
Of like three things, you need the number three.
You need three to exist. Yes,
maybe,
yes,
yeah.
yes. Although, and maybe I shouldn't say controversial things, but like I kind of don't think the number three does exist. Anyway, don't tell the dean. Yeah.
So, what about in cases of things that like someone else experiences that but we can't prove that they experienced it? So, does proof have anything to do with that as well, or?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Yeah, good. So, I think we're going to have to modify the principle in some way, or we're going to have to build it all into trustworthy, or something like that. It's definitely going to be the case that people do have experiences that are illusory. Right? Hallucination is a real phenomenon. Right? It's a real scientifically legitimate phenomenon. And what you don't want is for your empirical principle like this to tell you to believe in the reality of things that just anyone, including yourself, has experiences of, or as if of those things. Yeah, I don't have an on-the-fly way of modifying it, but it'll have to be modified. Michael, I like retracted calling on you before, so now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things have added up, and now I'm just trying to figure out which were the 7 points that originally made. So, okay. So the first one, you're defining morality, objective morality, saying that it's something that applies to everyone.
Yes.
Everywhere, it's something that's right or wrong that applies to everyone.
Yeah. I mean something like facts about which actions are right and wrong. We can say for everyone, everywhere, regardless of what anyone thinks. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Second thing.
Yeah.
Going back to Hume's example, right? Word.
Yeah.
Right. Even with the opening that Hume's example still holds is that you can't pinpoint what the vice is. Like there's no physical thing to say like, yes, right behind the liver, that is where the wrong is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's he's definitely right about that part.
Yeah, so I think, and then if you can't in the objective sort of tangible sense, you can't find the wrong, then I think maybe Hume's example still holds. Wait.
Yeah, well, so there's multiple steps, right? So I ran through Hume's argument kind of quick, but there's different steps in the argument, and you can think that some steps work and other steps don't, or some claims, some premises in the argument work and some premises don't, right? So one claim that he's making is you don't have any experience of viciousness or vice. That is, you don't have any experience of wrongness. That's one claim. And then there's the additional claim, sort of like, therefore, well, then there's a principle like this, right? And then you put the fact that you don't experience the vice together with a principle like this. That'll be another premise in the argument. And maybe there's some more in there, right? And then you're going to get a conclusion, something like, therefore, you shouldn't believe in the reality of objective moral facts. That is, a fact about what's really right and wrong, in this case, in the object, in the act, other than just in your mind. And so the thought is, he can be right that you don't experience the vice, but then he can be wrong about this. In my line, the line that I'm pushing, is that is that this principle doesn't apply to cases like that, cases of normative objects, like moral objects. Yeah?
I feel like another point that what you feel is right or wrong really is just an emotion,
Yeah.
emotional reaction
Yeah.
to an event or phenomenon.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that would be, in my opinion, the harder crux of his argument to disprove. Because as you point out, various cultures have different reactions to various phenomena. So
Yes.
therefore, that's what I think is the more convincing argument, that there is not an objective morality, because it's just merely an emotional reaction.
Well, I'm not sure. Just like, if you take it just like that, we don't yet have an argument against objective moral facts. We have a statement that there aren't any. Like a very kind of attractive statement that there aren't any, right? But nonetheless, it's just a statement. It's not an argument yet, right? If we just say, look, all the cultures in the world, and indeed all the people, if you get detailed enough, disagree about which actions are right and which actions are wrong. And then what else do you say? Then you add something like, and there's no objective moral facts about, there's no objective facts about what's right and wrong. Well, if you just take that statement as just a statement, then it's just a statement of that I think is incorrect, but I haven't really argued against. You could change that "and" there to something like a "therefore," and then you've got the beginnings of a loose structure of an argument. It's like, there is all this disagreement, therefore there are no objective moral facts, right? And then it's closer to the argument that we were talking about before. But maybe I've missed something. Adam seems like he's gonna.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if you have missed something. Well, perhaps you've missed this.
Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, the big problem with trying to apply this principle to like all kinds of statements and laws is that it's self-defeating insofar as it appears to be an epistemic norm.
Yeah.
I wonder if making a distinction between, say, like hypothetical and categorical imperatives in a way that could have us kind of reconceive some of these things that we're thinking of as normative laws, as perhaps descriptive laws, might save the principle and, sorry, Ryan, in the process maybe lose the defense of moral laws. So, for example, if, like, for prudential laws, it's something like, if you want to make lots of money, bail on your group members and do a solo career. And that's the sort of thing that like seems like it could be descriptive. It's just describing the means to an end. And we could do a similar sort of a thing with epistemic norms by saying,
if you want to believe the truth,
you don't want your beliefs to be contradicted by future experience, or if you want to believe true things,
or something like that,
you want to think of it, then these can be reworked as descriptive claims in a way that it seems like the moral laws maybe won't.
Good. Well, let's try it. The way you said it was something like, I want to object to the first way you do it, with hypotheticalizing it. Right? So if you go, if you want, dollars, then release solo album. Right? Something like that. But it only applies in a limited domain. Beyonce from 1995 to 1998, that was her window, something like that. When was Destiny's Child a thing? 90 to 96, I think? I Googled it earlier. Okay. So anyway, this, it is now hypothetical, right? It's got this structure where it's like it's got an antecedent with a desire in it, what you want. But then I think it's still normative, like really this is just elliptical for then you ought to, right? So it's still a claim about what ought to be the case. It's just, it only ought to be the case if something happens, if you want this, right? So it won't work like this.
I could represent what seems like the same sort of content by just saying, drop the ought.
Good.
And just say, releasing a solo album will get you money.
Good. Releasing, now we've gotten rid of the ought. That I was gonna do this, but then you no. It happens at the same pace or whatever. Releasing solo album will cause money, right? Like now it's just a causal claim.
It's not action.
Right. So now it doesn't tell you what to do. It just tells you what will happen or whatever. And maybe that's all there is. If you know. Right. You might have thought like, well, I mean, it just works so good with evil things. Pick your favorite terrible, truly evil thing, right? So what that it will result in something? We want to know whether it should be done or not. And presumably you think it shouldn't. That's the important or interesting thing, not what follows from what, causally. Yeah.
This might be like a very elementary question. But regarding what Hume saying that like, if you look onto like any active device and you look onto the other and like fire is reflecting itself.
Yeah.
Is it possible that he's mistaken in saying that like, what we might call a negative emotion in seeing a murder is actually just the way the emotion is spice?
Good. Good. So this is a way of pressing against the other premise in the argument, right? So like in responding to Michael's question, I sort of roughly, without even writing it down, sketched out like the steps in a Humean argument. It's like you don't experience the evilness. You shouldn't believe in things that you don't experience, something like this, right? Therefore, you shouldn't believe in evilness, right? That's how the argument goes. And so the thought was the original. Well, there was a problem with this, but the thought is, it might be wrong. You might be wrong that you don't. He might also be wrong. He might be doubly wrong that you don't also experience evilness. Maybe when you have that, that's just what an experience of evilness feels like. Just like you didn't know. Maybe you didn't know that you had experienced. I don't know. What's like a platypus? You think you've never seen a platypus? But actually, there was a platypus at that thing that you were at, and you smelled it, and you're like, what's this smell? I don't know. Turns out you had experienced a platypus olfactorily, right? You just didn't know what platypi smelled like, right? And the thought is maybe vice, maybe Hume's wrong about his other claim, maybe vice is something you experience, and Hume just doesn't know what it feels like. That feeling of disapprobation, maybe that's just what evilness feels like when you experience it. Huh, yeah, maybe Hume's wrong. Yeah, double wrong. Derek, and then... oh, yeah, you had... Yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully I'm getting this across in the correct way. So what happens if you find out that there is a descriptive morality that you can extrapolate to the normative realm, if that makes sense?
I'm not sure. So the way I'm using the word morality, it just is a normative thing. So I'm wondering what the descriptive morality is.
So the way that I see it is like morality could be biological. And
Good.
In that sense, it would be descriptive, and something like that could be extrapolated to norms.
Good. Okay. So Hume, I think, agrees that that moral sentiments are a biological thing, right? So the thought is something like, yeah, I mean, it's an evolutionary thing, you might think. The species evolved. I mean, this is controversial, I guess. I don't know enough about evolutionary biology to know, but like maybe it's true that our species evolved certain moral sentiments, certain moral feelings, because it advantaged us in some way. And so there's totally a biological explanation, an evolutionary explanation for why we have these feelings. The trick is to go from these feelings to the existence of universal moral laws or universal moral facts that are just out there saying which actions are truly right and truly wrong, regardless of what anyone thinks about it. Maybe the route to go is that that's what moral reality feels like, is it feels like that. So that, I think your best bet at making that jump from descriptive facts about how people feel morally to normative facts, objective normative moral facts, is by route of, or one good bet is by route of, that's just what normative morality feels like.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar that there's morality and biology because, as you said, we have social creatures develop certain ways of removing people that would cause other people's reproductive.
Yep. We condemn people that behave in certain ways, and if we hadn't started condemning people that behaved in certain ways, indeed, some of us did back in the day, those groups didn't make it evolutionarily. And so we resulted from the ones that censured and condemned certain forms of behavior, and we made it, and that's why we all have, I mean, you might think that that's why. Something like that, this is really very speculative, but something like that might be the reason why there isn't, widespread disagreement. Like, there's some disagreement, but you might think there's actually a lot of agreement, and the reason there's a lot of agreement is because of these evolutionary forces. But like, always keep in mind the difference between our moral sentiments, our moral feelings, what we feel is right and wrong, and the moral truth, if there is one. And then I'll get Ryan. Yeah, you. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm still having a whole how can we know if there is an objective morality? I know you said you believe in the existence of epistemic laws and accept epistemic laws.
Yeah.
So why would it be absurd to accept the existence of moral laws?
Yeah, that's all I said. That's all I said, and then I stopped.
That doesn't. I don't know. It's not following from.
Well, it doesn't. Good. The reason it's not following you is that it doesn't follow. It doesn't. So all I was doing when I said, look, we already believe in epistemic normativity, so like, there's nothing spooky or weird about moral normativity. That's not a decisive argument for the existence of moral reality. It's just like eliminating what I take to be one of the barriers. Indeed, it's like kind of the same barrier that this argument put up in the first place. So if you're disappointed because I haven't given like a full-blown direct argument for the existence of objective morality, then you may remain disappointed because I don't have one that I'm prepared to give right now. Ryan.
I just want to make a quick comment on what you guys mentioned about biology being grounded. The difficulty with that, with trying to make that move from descriptive, like this is the behavior of this or that species, this is what perpetuated our species, is at best you can say doing something we consider immoral is socially deviant. So you still have no prescriptive factor there. If someone wants to rape or kill someone, it's really socially deviant in the herd mentality, but there still lacks that prescriptive part. What I really want to get at was that every statement here someone has made to either try to reduce it to a descriptive claim or just flat out reject that we have these normative claims is sort of implicitly, it's a normative behavior, because what you're saying each time is you're saying, no, that's not true. You ought to believe this, which is what's true. And to even say that's wrong, to say, no, Ryan, you have that wrong, it's like, well, are you not now also trying to push me towards truth?
Yeah, good.
You get a circularity there that seems you're always appealing to a normative claim.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
can't be both.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll tell you how yes and no. Yes, in the sense that often implicit in a discourse are certain epistemic or discursive norms, right? But it doesn't directly follow. Like it's not entailed by the fact that there's some evolutionary fact and that someone uttered that fact. It doesn't follow directly from that everyone else ought to now believe it. You need to add this normative premise, and although that epistemic normative premise is plausible, well, it's an extra step or whatever. That's just one little point I wanted to add. Michael.
Well, first I think for biology, where you're going, because objective morality, so that we evolve to have sort of moral sense. And the thing I would think of is an objective morality would apply, an objective, and the word objective, wouldn't it apply to people who are not human as well? Like if there was a conscious Martian race, right, would their objective morality would apply to them?
Yeah, good.
But they would have a completely separate evolutionary track.
Oh, good. So this point about evolutionary, I didn't see it till the end. Good. Okay. this point about disagreement, and there's maybe not so much disagreement, and there's maybe this biological or evolutionary thread behind our moral opinions or moral sentiments or whatever. The default view, you might think in morality, is that if there's an objective moral truth, it applies equally well to androids and aliens, if there are such things, or if there were such things, right? Like if you have an alien shows up, and then an alien's like, hi, I'm conscious, I have rational thoughts, I can get a B+ in a logic class, I've got like a hyperspace drive, and I can communicate with you, and I'm just as good at humans at this whole chit-chat game, but I'm all tentacles or whatever, right? If the alien shows up like that, the default view you might think is look, they're bound by the moral laws that we're bound by. But the thought is they don't have that evolutionary history or whatever. Yeah, I take it that the main upshot or one upshot of that is just that makes the story that you have to tell going from evolutionary facts to real objective moral facts, it makes it even more complicated or whatever. But you might have already thought that story was very hard to tell in the first place.
Also,
yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced by the whole, so that there's prudential, moral,
epistemic, norms, yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced by okay, well, we have epistemic laws that implicitly must believe it.
Yeah.
But then how are you making that jump to say,
good.
Prudential, moral laws? That's
good.
That's a massive jump.
It's a jump, man. I just jumped. I didn't even put down the floor or whatever or the bridge. No, that's right. Look, there are arguments to be made, and there are reasons to think that one variety of normativity is real and another variety is not. The thought though was just these are all broadly of a type, and once you let one in, all of the arguments against the other one, all of the arguments against moral fact, moral laws, moral reality, that hinged on their mere normativity must have failed because there really is some other type of normativity. So that move was still a kind of merely a defense of moral reality against a certain specific kind of attack. It wasn't really an argument for its reality. And there's a jump there, and I just sort of made it, but now I admitted it, so that makes it better, maybe.
Yes, sir. I was just wondering, when we talk about the biological features and the evolution and all, but don't we also have a defeat for that today? Because we have sociopaths and people that we consider insane. We have people today that we say they can't already defer from right or wrong.
Yeah.
And you're just saying they didn't evolve enough, even though they're around today.
Good. Us. Look, there's a lot of ways in which people diverge from the evolutionary norm. I mean, of course, every mutation, even the ones that lead to adaptations, diverge from the evolutionary norm, right? So, someone is born and they I don't know, they don't have a tail anymore. I know it was slower than that. I guess it got smaller and smaller, but as a dummy example, they diverged from the evolved pattern of the species, and then it turned out it was great, and then they procreated more, and then you speciate. The species splits, right? And then there's the monkeys or the apes, and then us or whatever. So those are the cases where some individual that deviates from the evolutionary norm successfully procreates enough or whatever. But the answer, the only response I have to that is just yes, people do deviate from the evolutionary norm or whatever. But remember, keep in mind, if the question we're interested in is whether there are objective moral truths, objective moral laws, facts about which actions are really and truly right and which actions are really and truly wrong that apply to everyone everywhere, if that's what we're interested in, then that's a different thing from whether we evolve to have moral opinions. Though those moral opinions maybe get us an argument for the objective moral facts or maybe don't. Heather.
I think, for me, one of the problems about asking the question about whether or not there's objective morality is one of the big differences between uniforms and objective morality is I have a pretty good idea of what it is there isn't. When there isn't a uniform, there's a thing.
Yeah.
Think of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, good.
pretty horses and shape.
Right.
Form.
Right.
But when well, is there objective morality? I'm
Right.
not quite sure
Right.
what that is that I'm trying to prove
Yeah, good.
exists or not exists.
You're good.
So we sort of jumped, from my perspective,
Yeah.
in kind of, we jumped too far.
Yeah.
To try to answer this question without, okay, well, what would it be?
What were we even? Yeah.
Be?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you only have like I had like 40 minutes.
No, I know.
But okay. But like, here's a go. Let me try.
Yeah.
Well, let me just try, and now in 1 minute, to specify, to give you a unicorn story about, objective moral facts, right? That is a unicorn story is just like I tell you. It's like, it looks like a horse. It has a horn on the middle and the top of its head. It farts rainbows. If you drink its blood, you become immortal. Or whatever the facts about unicorns are, right? And then you're like, okay. Now I know what it would be for there to be such a thing. Thank you. Now I know what it would be for there to be such a thing, and then we can go looking and see if we find one, right? And so let's spend a little bit more time saying what. Well, this isn't going to be that satisfying. I don't know, but here we go anyway. The objective moral entities or whatever, it seems like we can call them entities if we want to talk about it in terms of laws. They could be entities. Laws are entities. They're things, right? Or we can talk about facts. Either one will do. I can run it either way, right? If we're happy with certain facts or patterns, right? There's a fact that people attend, movies. That's a fact, right? And you believe that fact is true. It's a true fact. Fine. If we're doing it in terms of facts, then I'm just going to write a moral fact underneath it. Now it's going to have a moral vocabulary. It's going to have some moral terms, and this is going to have some cinematic terms, right? But the thought is you understand what these terms mean. What's people ought not murder, right? And what is the ought? Well, maybe it is a little more mysterious than cinematic stuff, but look, I just always lean back on that epistemic stuff because people ought believe whatever they ought to believe, that the earth is round or whatever. It just seems like we know if we're comfortable with that being true, whatever that is, then this is just going to be slightly different from that. I mean, so here's my unicorn story that I've given very poorly and quickly. It's something like, what kind of a thing is it? It's like a horse, right? Except for it's a little different than a horse. It's got one of these on the middle of its head, and and whatever. Okay, so and then you're okay, I'm looking for something that looks like a horse, but it's got one of these on its head. I get it. Okay, I'll see if I find that. It's the best I got.
The issue that I'm having with understanding the principle is if you completely trust that one that you have for your mother, your mother has a knowledge for you.
Yeah. Well, she tells you that she experienced a unicorn, right? So she doesn't just tell you there is a unicorn. She tells you, I saw a unicorn and I wrote it, or whatever. Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Yeah. Yep. Right. Good. Yep.
You may not trust them even though what they say is true. Or
right.
You may trust them and they may just be on drugs.
So here's the thing. I don't think the principle gets the result, nor do I think it should get the result, that under no circumstances should you believe in the existence of God. Or indeed, it shouldn't even get the result that under no circumstances should you believe in the existence of unicorns. Right? Listen. Someone tells you that they met a unicorn or God. Right? Otherwise, you think they're a very trustworthy person. Maybe you think that this is a rather exotic claim. So you look into their trustworthiness in greater detail. You subject them to a brain scan, if you like. You do a background check. You call up all their neighbors, and you ask about their recent behavior. If you conclude that this person, and then there's more people too, right? And they saw the thing as well. They saw the unicorn also. They heard the word of God, right? You do brain scans on all of them. You call all of their references. You really have excellent evidence that they're trustworthy. then this principle, it seems to me, you do enough of that, you do enough checking as to their trustworthiness, then this principle gets the result that you ought to believe in unicorns. But that's the right result.
But it doesn't guarantee there are.
It doesn't guarantee that there are. That's right. Oh, good. Good distinction. So, like, just because you follow this principle, it doesn't mean you'll be infallible.
Okay, because earlier
Yeah, good.
the person has to be alive still. So that's the case.
Right.
Saying, well,
Right.
Moses experienced God, Moses is materialism.
Right.
And how can you fact check someone that is dead?
Yeah, it's harder. Harder to fact check them. Yeah, but you call their living references, and so, or their, yeah, it's harder to fact check. But the point is just and let me just repeat this, and then I'll get Gary. The point is just one. This principle only says what you should believe. It doesn't say what's going to turn out to be true. Now, if you follow this principle, the thought is the empiricist says you're going to be right more than you're going to be wrong. But look. You follow this principle, and then sometimes it turns out that a whole group of people was hallucinating, trustworthy people. But you were right to believe them because the evidence available to you at the time suggested that they were trustworthy. That's exactly right. You did the right thing. It just, you're not perfect. Yeah, Gary.
That's what it emphasizes. There's actually like two principles here, right? So Hume's argument is directly relying on this only if principle. You shouldn't believe it unless there's experiential evidence. And there's a different principle which says you should believe it if. That's a harder one to formulate because that involves when you need to bring in defeaters and all kinds of things. Don't believe them if they're drunk or they just took mescaline or LSD or whatever.
Right.
Now you can combine the two, which I think is what you have there. So
I have here. I only have the only.
That would be the if and only if version.
Right.
It says you should believe it if and only if.
Right.
Either you experience it or someone you trust.
Yeah, good.
Or it explains something.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the principle as I've written it here is maybe not altogether clear about this issue, but I suppose actually.
But I think Hume only, in his negative argument, only needed the necessary condition principle.
That's right.
Said
the only if principle.
The only if part. That you shouldn't believe it unless there's a certain.
That's right. It doesn't. Indeed, one way of following that principle is just to not believe anything.
Yeah.
But
all these principles have the problem of normativity in it here.
That's right. Frank.
Is this to say that we shouldn't believe things that we don't know exist, like unicorns or morality or virtues or piety?
Yeah, this one I think if you're reading it strictly, where this says only if, you should only believe in these things, the direct implication is like this just some stuff you should not believe in.
Yeah.
Right. But it's hard to, it's a vaguely worded. You think we should? Yeah. We will give people the chance to leave if they want to leave. We'll sort of call things off. But then I and some others maybe will hang out in the room and chat for a little while longer. But before that, so philosophy is a whole thing. It's like a whole discipline. We're a whole department. There's like several of us. There's all sorts of activities that we do. There's something coming up called Public Republic, which is happening on September 27th. And it's all day, and it will be out by the Minerva statue. And that's a reading of the masterpiece of Plato. Maybe you've heard of him. He was a wrestler from quite some time ago, and he's a big deal. And that's a fun activity. And then there's all sorts of classes. And then there's an ethics bowl. That's like a debate-style competition that happens. And there's a philosophy club. And there's all sorts of cool stuff. And thank you very much for coming. And if you brought a chair in, please leave it. Do not remove it. Just leave it where it is.